Hi guys, welcome to another video from Tricky Ricky. So this is a direct follow-up to my video earlier, which was talking about the return of my Canyon Neuron On from Canyon UK, which had come back for a warranty repair. I did touch upon in that video that I'd actually bought myself the Focus Jam2 whilst I was waiting for the Canyon to be repaired. So in this video we're going to do a quick head-to-head video. We're looking at not only the bike's designs, this is going to be a direct comparison between the Bosch drive system and the Shimano drive system, some of which you might have seen in other videos elsewhere, but this is an average rider's view and an honest review. Here's what we think. Alright guys, so there we can see the bikes together in the picture there. What we are effectively looking at is the Neuron On by Canyon, which is their trail bike, and the Focus Jam2 by Focus, which is their trail bike. Main differences between these two is the travel. So basically the Canyon ships with a 130 travel and the Jam2, Focus Jam2 ships with a 150 travel. Both fit into their trail category and are effectively the middle bike in their range. Focus do offer the Thron, which is a full suspension touring bike, but aside from the travel differences, they both are classed as trail bikes. The Canyon is using the Shimano E8000 system and the Focus is using the Bosch Gen 4 CX system. Let's get closer in and have a look at the comparisons. Alright guys, first of all, what I like about the Shimano system, I think the motor is very compact and it usually integrates really well with the frame design. On Canyon, on these bikes, this section here is quite chunky, and it does make for a relatively large bottom bracket area, but the actual integration of the motor is actually nice and smooth. And if you look at the Q factor of the motor, kind of from side to side, it's actually pretty good. Overall, quite impressive. E8000 motor, I know it does have the occasional reliability issue, but generally it's a very solid, reliable motor. What I love about the Shimano system is the discrete setup of the actual cockpit. So you've got a very discrete screen and a really easy to use and a nice intuitive mode selector switch, which is not obtrusive at all on the frame. So system integration, very good on Shimano. Moving on to the Focus, I actually think from the drive side they've got this bottom bracket area and this motor area absolutely bang on. It looks really compact, really tucked in there. Hard to see at first glance that this is actually an e-bike. However, if you do look at the Q factor on this, you actually see the offset of the motor is significantly more. Basically this is a slightly wider motor. It doesn't integrate quite as well on the non-drive side, but the overall form factor of the bottom bracket area is actually much smaller on the Focus. What I dislike about this compared to Shimano is this mode selector switch, and this has got the kiosk display, which I've actually got mounted on this acid mount to bring it onto the side of the stem here rather than mounted on top, which I think is a bit vulnerable. The kiosk display itself is actually very good. This mode selector switch, it's not the worst. I prefer it to the Purion. It's relatively easy to use. It's not as easy to use as the Shimano system, but these plus minus buttons are relatively easy to hit whilst riding. Integration, not quite as nice on the Bosch setup. Right, looking at these two next to each other again, I'm going to talk about motor noise and riding noise. Now, there's been a lot made of the Shimano motor noise and the Bosch motor noise, and there's been a lot of tests. I subscribe to a channel on YouTube called Rob Rides EMTB. Excellent channel. He does some excellent reviews. He doesn't just stick to top end bikes, he reviews everything right through the price range. Highly recommend you check out his channel. Now, one thing that stood out for me, he does make quite a lot of the clattering noise, or the kind of thudding that you get from the Bosch motor when you're descending, and it was actually something I was looking out for when I first rode the Focus bike. Now, I can honestly say from my point of view I expected that to be far worse. So what I found it to be was actually a relatively low level thudding type clatter noise. I'm not really sure how best to describe it, but it wasn't a rattle. It wasn't a rattling noise, and it was not intrusive on my ride at all. So actually, for noise descending, not the Shimano motor is quieter, but the Bosch motor is not intrusive. It does not intrude on your ride. Now then, noise when climbing under load, I think if you were to put a decibel meter next to these two, they'd be probably very similar. However, the Shimano is a much higher pitched whine under load, and therefore is much more intrusive. The Bosch motor makes a much lower pitched groan, I would say, and you just can't hear it as much. It doesn't really stand out that much over the kind of tyre noise and the other noises that are going on. So actually under load, I would say the Bosch is significantly quieter in the real world setting compared to the Shimano motor. That's a kind of a big deal for me, because noise when you're riding, noise when you're climbing, the whining noise, I find it does intrude on your ride, and I think actually being able to really get that load on and not be worried about the kind of whining noise that the motor is making is a big thing. There are quieter motors out there. The Bros motor's quieter. I think there's another one. I think maybe it's the Yamaha motor is quieter as well. The Fawatsa motor is quieter, but if you're looking at these kind of systems, for overall quietness, I would say the Bosch setup is the better. Now bear in mind, we are talking about the E8000 motor here, so if we are considering the new EP8 motor from Shimano, I've heard that that is virtually silent whilst you're climbing, but is significantly louder whilst you're descending. The rattling noise is much louder than that on the Bosch when you're actually descending. Again, it's a trade-off. I think if you just go light for light, you want 85 Newton meters, a similar sized battery. The EP8 is certainly a really valid shout. It's probably the smallest and lightest full power motor on the market. Well, it's not currently on the market when it is actually released on the bikes. But currently I'm just looking at these two bikes, so this is E8000 versus Gen 4 CX. This Gen 4 has had the firmware upgrade, so it is running at 85 Newton meters. Last thing I want to talk about is actually geometry and frame size. So in this bike, this was a late 2020 model. I actually got it cheap. This is the 6.8 Jam Squared, which comes in at £4.5 grand. I got this cheap because it was literally the last bike that was in stock of this model. It was a medium. I actually wanted a large, but I decided to go with a medium, which is actually coming in at a 430 reach, which is much more equivalent to the old Neuron On in a size medium. What I have done with this, however, is actually put some 800mm bars on this, and I've increased the stem. Ships with a 45mm stem by default. I've actually increased that to 60mm with an 800mm wide bar, and with a slightly steeper seat angle at 65 degrees, it's actually giving me a really comfortable riding position. The 800mm bar means it feels good and comfortable and plenty of space when I'm up on the pedals. And generally it means it's a fraction lighter than the Neuron On, which in this bike is actually a size large, coming in at a 455 reach. Now the problem with this is it ships with a 60mm stem as standard and a 760 bar as standard, but this is the new integrated setup with the cable routing through the bar and out through the stem here. I have actually modified a 50mm stem to shorten the stem, but I cannot put a wider bar on this. So I'm actually running, I would say a setup here that fits and it works well for me, but I actually do like a slightly wider bar, especially when the terrain gets a little bit more gnarly. So you're a bit more limited as to what you can do with setting the bike up to your fit. However, in practice, with the wider bar on the Focus, but the longer reach and shorter bar on the Canyon, the fit and feel actually feels very similar. I would say the Focus is slightly more comfortable due to the slightly steeper seat angle. But actually, if you look at the bikes side by side, you can see that the Focus is a little bit more compact in the reach, but actually it rides really well, so no problems there. I mentioned in my previous video, I'm keeping one and selling the other. I'm keeping the Focus and selling the Canyon. Not that the Canyon's a bad bike, it's actually a very, very nice bike. I do like Canyon bikes. They certainly know how to build a good bike in terms of ride characteristics. Their quality is lacking a little bit of late. I've documented that well in my previous video, so if you want more information on that, go and visit those videos. But there you go, there's my head-to-head comparison between the Neuron On and the Focus Jam Squared. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap this one up right there. Hope you've liked this video. If you have, please give me that thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you want future notifications for content that I'm going to be putting out there, and I'm going to try and make that more frequent, hit that bell for notifications. And if you have any questions, I've not seen a direct comparison between these two bikes, so if you have any questions, you're looking at these as part of your bike selection, hit me up in the comments and I'll do my best to answer the questions. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap this up and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers guys.